As you are sitting here watching this, flights in Dubai are grounded. Planes that were supposed to carry executives to billion-dollar signings are parked on tarmacs going nowhere. Gas prices across the globe are climbing so aggressively that logistics companies are rewriting their entire quarterly forecasts in real time. The United States and Israel have launched a coordinated military operation against targets in Iran, and the shockwave is not contained to the battlefield. It is rippling through boardrooms, through trading floors, through supply chains that connect every corner of the global economy. And in a mid-rise office building in Houston, Texas, a man named Derek Cole is sitting at his desk on the 14th floor, watching the same news everyone else is watching. But he is not panicking. He is not refreshing his portfolio. He is not calling his broker. He is reaching into the bottom drawer of his desk, and he is pulling out a manila folder that he has been building for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Today is the day he destroys his boss. Meridian Global Solutions occupied a peculiar space in the energy sector, not a drilling company, not a refinery, a consulting firm. The kind of company that helped other companies navigate the labyrinth of international energy contracts, regulatory frameworks, compliance protocols, political risk assessments. The work was invisible to the outside world, but enormously profitable. Their client list included state-owned energy companies across the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Central Africa. Their client list included state-owned energy companies across the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Central Africa. The people who worked at Meridian fell into 2 categories. There were the deal-makers, the senior executives who flew business class and took client dinners at restaurants where the appetizers cost more than a car payment. And there were the builders, the analysts, the associates, the compliance officers who actually assembled the deals brick by brick, clause by clause, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. The deal-makers got the bonuses, the builders got the ulcers. And presiding over the International Partnerships Division, the most profitable and most feared department in the entire company, was a man whose reputation preceded him down every hallway, into every meeting room, and through every exit interview. His name was Victor Harlan. Victor Harlan was 53 years old. He had been at Meridian for 11 years and had been promoted 4 times, each promotion earned not through the admiration of his peers, but through the revenue he generated and the fear he inspired. He was, by every metric the company measured, a success. By every metric that mattered to the people who worked for him, he was a catastrophe. His management style was not merely demanding. Demanding can be respected. Victor's style was designed to diminish. He sent emails like this one, sent at midnight to the entire department, not because the work required it, but because he wanted every person on his team to go to bed with a knot in their stomach and wake up with dread. He called his weekly meetings operations briefings. He referred to deadlines as kill dates. He once told a junior analyst in front of 23 colleagues that she had, and I am quoting internal testimony here, the strategic instincts of a house plant. 3 employees in his department filed formal complaints with human resources in a single calendar year. The complaints described a pattern of public humiliation, impossible workloads, retaliatory behavior when questioned, and a culture of intimidation that made people physically ill. One complainant described waking up at 4 in the morning unable to breathe, convinced that something she had written in a report would be used as grounds for her termination. All 3 complaints were investigated internally. All 3 investigations concluded with the same finding: insufficient evidence of policy violation. All 3 complainants were gone from the company within 8 weeks. 2 resigned. 1 was placed on a performance improvement plan so aggressively structured that it was, in effect, a termination with extra paperwork. Human resources did not protect employees from Victor Harlan. Human resources protected Victor Harlan from accountability. And sitting at this desk, 3 rows from the door of the man who made every day a small emergency, was the person who would eventually bring the entire structure down. His name was Derek Cole. He was 34 years old. He had an MBA from a solid but unspectacular state university. He had been at Meridian for 6 years and 3 months. He had worked directly under Victor Harlan for 3 of those years. He was quiet. He was competent. He was invisible in exactly the way that dangerous people are invisible. And he had been paying very, very close attention. To understand what Derek Cole did and why it worked, we need to go back 18 months to the deal that made Victor Harlan feel invincible. Meridian Global had been courting a contract for nearly 2 years. The client was the Caspian Energy Consortium, a group of energy interests with operational ties to Iranian state petroleum infrastructure. The contract was worth $47 million over 5 years. It would be Meridian's largest single international engagement in company history. But doing business connected to Iran, even indirectly, is one of the most legally treacherous things an American company can attempt. Sanctions regulations, administered by the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, are dense, shifting, and unforgiving. The penalties for violations are not slaps on the wrist. They are existential. Hundreds of millions of dollars in fines, criminal prosecution of individuals, reputational damage that cannot be repaired. To navigate this, the deal was structured through layers of intermediaries. Meridian would not contract directly with any Iranian entity. Instead, they would work through Gulf Bridge Partners, a UE-registered consulting firm that served as a compliance buffer. Gulf Bridge, in turn, would interface with the Caspian Energy Consortium. On paper, Meridian's contractual relationship extended only to a company registered in a jurisdiction with no sanctions restrictions. The structure was reviewed by Meridian's legal team. It was reviewed by external counsel. Compliance officers signed off. It was, by all outward appearances, clean. But outward appearances were Victor Harlan's specialty. Derek was on the ground in Dubai twice during the deal negotiations. He was the one who prepared the compliance documentation. He was the one who built the financial models. He was the one who sat in secondary meetings with Gulf Bridge's operational team while Victor took the primary meetings, the dinners, the handshakes, the relationship management, as Victor called it. And because Derek did the actual work, Derek saw the actual details, all of them. What Derek discovered, across those 2 trips and the months of work that surrounded them, was a parallel deal running underneath the official one. Victor Harlan was negotiating a personal arrangement with Gulf Bridge Partners, a facilitation fee, a private payment made directly to Victor outside of Meridian's knowledge, outside of any corporate accounting system, outside of any compliance review. In exchange for what the emails described as ensuring continued prioritization of the Gulf Bridge relationship within Meridian's international portfolio. The language was careful. It had clearly been reviewed by someone with legal training, but the substance was unmistakable. Victor was taking a kickback. The USB drive ended up on Derek's desk because Victor asked him to print a single document from it, a presentation slide deck for a board meeting. Victor did not think Derek would explore the rest of the drive's contents. Victor did not think about Derek at all, really. Derek was furniture. Derek was infrastructure. That was Victor's most consequential miscalculation. Derek copied everything on that drive. He cross-referenced the personal email timestamps with official meeting schedules, with hotel booking confirmations he had processed as part of his administrative duties, with the board-approved contract terms he himself had helped draft. He did not confront Victor. He did not go to human resources. And then the bombs fell. We are not here to analyze the military operation itself. We are not here to assign moral weight to any government's decisions. We are here to document what happened inside one company when the geopolitical landscape shifted so violently that every assumption, every calculation, every carefully constructed legal buffer was suddenly exposed to forces that no compliance manual had anticipated. Within 72 hours, the operational landscape for every company with exposure to the Middle East had fundamentally changed. Dubai's airport, one of the world's critical hubs for international business travel and cargo transit, experienced disruptions that stranded thousands of business travelers and delayed shipments across multiple sectors. Gas prices surged with a velocity that rewrote quarterly projections overnight. Companies that had carefully structured deals through Gulf region intermediaries found themselves suddenly, uncomfortably visible to regulators who were now scrutinizing every Iran-adjacent transaction on the books. At Meridian Global Solutions, the crisis was existential. Their largest international contract was structured through a UAE intermediary connected to Iranian energy interests. 3 days ago, that was a carefully managed compliance situation. Now it was a potential front-page scandal. The board convened an emergency session. Legal counsel was brought in. Every executive with knowledge of the Gulf Bridge deal was called to account for every decision, every approval, every handshake. Victor Harlan should have been afraid. But Victor Harlan did what Victor Harlan always did. He controlled the story. He was already preparing a presentation for the board that reframed the Gulf Bridge deal as a model of proactive risk management, a deal designed from the beginning to withstand exactly this kind of geopolitical disruption. He was going to stand in front of the board and tell them that he had anticipated this, that the intermediary structure was his shield, that Meridian's exposure was, in his words, minimal. He was going to lie, comprehensively, confidently, and with a slide deck. And if history was any guide, the board would believe him, because Victor had always been believed before, because it was easier to believe the man generating $47 million in revenue than to investigate whether the revenue was clean. 3 rows away, Derek Cole opened his laptop, looked at the news, and understood something with perfect clarity. This was the moment. Not because the world was ending, not because he wanted chaos, but because he understood, with the analytical precision that had made him so effective at his job and so invisible to his boss, that the external environment had just eliminated every mechanism that had protected Victor Harlan for the last decade. The board could not afford to look the other way. Not now. Not with regulators already circling. Not with Iran in every headline. Not with gas prices making the energy sector the most scrutinized industry in the country. For 3 years, Derek had watched complaints disappear into filing cabinets. He had watched HR investigations conclude with predetermined findings. He had watched Victor absorb accountability like a black hole absorbs light. But that system required one thing to function: the assumption that protecting Victor was cheaper than exposing him. That assumption had just been obliterated. The email that ended Victor Harlan's career took 14 minutes to write. Not because Derek composed it in 14 minutes. He had been drafting and revising it for over a year, updating it as new evidence emerged, refining the language each time until it read not as a grievance, but as an institutional risk assessment. 14 minutes was simply how long it took to finalize the recipient list, attach the supporting documentation, and press send. The attached document was 23 pages. Page 1 through 4 established the timeline of the Gulf Bridge Partners deal from initial contact through contract execution. Every meeting, every approval, every milestone, documented with dates, participants, and corresponding official records. Pages 5 through 9 presented 14 emails recovered from Victor Harlan's personal Gmail account. Communications conducted entirely outside of Meridian's corporate email system in violation of company policy, regulatory requirements, and the terms of Victor's own employment agreement. The emails documented direct negotiation of a private facilitation fee between Victor and Gulf Bridge Partners, a payment structure that was never disclosed to Meridian's board, never reviewed by compliance, and never reported in any regulatory filing. Pages 10 through 15 documented systematic pressure on Meridian's compliance team to accelerate due diligence reviews on the Gulf Bridge deal. Derek included internal communications from the compliance officer assigned to the deal, communications that revealed she had been instructed to finalize her review before it was complete, and that she had expressed concerns in writing that were never escalated. and pages 16 through 23 laid out the most damaging element of all. A detailed analysis demonstrating that the undisclosed facilitation fee, depending on how funds were routed through Gulf Bridge's accounts, may have resulted in financial flows that penetrated the sanctions barrier that the entire intermediary structure was designed to maintain. In plain language, Victor Harlan's personal greed may have turned a legally complex but defensible business arrangement into a sanctions violation that could cost Meridian everything. At 8:47 on a Tuesday morning, Derek Cole sent the email and drank his coffee. He did not tell anyone what he had done. He did not stand up from his desk. He did not look toward Victor Harlan's office. He had wargamed this moment for over a year. He knew exactly what would happen next, and approximately when and in what order. The board's response was immediate, and for the first time in Victor Harlan's tenure, it was not protective. In any other month, the board might have handled this quietly. An internal review, a conversation with Victor, a negotiated separation with a generous severance package and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. That was how these things were handled in corporate America. That was how Meridian had always handled them. But this was not any other month. The world was watching the Middle East. Regulators were watching every company with Gulf region exposure. The Department of Treasury was publicly signaling enhanced sanctions enforcement. Gas prices were a kitchen table issue in every American household, which meant energy companies were under political scrutiny from both parties. The board looked at Derek's document and understood, with the cold clarity of self-preservation, that burying this would be more dangerous than addressing it. Within 72 hours, Victor Harlan was suspended pending an independent investigation. His corporate email was frozen. His personal devices were subject to a legal preservation order. External counsel from Morrison and Whitfield was retained to conduct a full compliance audit of the Gulf Bridge deal. And Meridian's general counsel, acting on advice from outside lawyers, initiated a voluntary self-disclosure to the Office of Foreign Assets Control. The self-disclosure was critical. Under OFAC guidelines, companies that discover and voluntarily report potential violations before they are detected by regulators receive significantly more favorable treatment. By self-reporting, Meridian was positioning itself as a cooperator, not a target. And it was only possible because Derek Cole had given them no choice. 6 weeks after Derek sent his email, Victor Harlan was terminated for cause. The termination letter cited material violations of corporate policy, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and conduct that exposed the company to significant regulatory and legal risk. No severance, no negotiated departure, no quiet resignation with a reference letter that described him as seeking new opportunities. Terminated for cause. Those 3 words would follow Victor Harlan through every background check, every compliance screening, every job application for the rest of his professional life. The man who had made himself untouchable was, in the end, touched by a 23-page document and a senior analyst he had never bothered to notice. The aftermath reshaped Meridian from the inside. Derek Cole was not merely retained, he was promoted. The board, recognizing that his disclosure had likely saved the company from regulatory penalties that could have reached into the hundreds of millions, created a new position, Director of International Compliance, and offered it to him. He would report directly to the General Counsel. He would have authority over every international deal the company pursued. The man who had been building spreadsheets at 2 in the morning was now the person who decided whether those deals lived or died. Because Meridian self-reported and cooperated, the regulatory consequences were manageable. The company reformed its compliance infrastructure. It survived. The employees who had lived under Victor's regime kept their jobs. The board implemented new whistleblower protections, protections that, pointedly, had not existed when Derek made his disclosure. There is a particular kind of justice in what happened to Victor Harlan. Not the cinematic kind. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public humiliation, no moment where the villain realizes he has been outmaneuvered and falls to his knees. That is not how institutional destruction works. It works through documents and timestamps and regulatory frameworks. It works through systems. Victor Harlan was not defeated by Derek Cole. He was defeated by his own actions, exposed at the precise moment when the systems that had always protected him were no longer able to afford the cost of that protection. Derek simply chose the moment, and the moment was chosen with the same analytical precision that had made him exceptional at his job and invisible to his boss. There are 5 things that Derek Cole did that anyone watching this can learn from. I want to walk through them because they are not abstract principles. They are operational. First, he documented everything, and he started long before he had any plan to use it. Documentation was self-defense before it was offense. If you are in a toxic workplace today, begin documenting today. Dates, times, names, exact language. Do it consistently. Do it dispassionately. Store it outside of company systems. Second, he understood that the same information has radically different power depending on when it is deployed. Timing is not passive. Timing is a strategic decision. Derek waited for the external environment to eliminate the institutional incentive to protect his target. Third, he used systems rather than emotions. He did not confront Victor. He did not file an HR complaint that would be buried. He went to the board, to external counsel, to regulators. He used the mechanisms of institutional accountability because those mechanisms are more powerful than any individual. Fourth, he protected himself legally before he acted. Derek consulted with a personal attorney at his own expense to understand his rights and exposure under whistleblower protection statutes. He ensured that he was shielded before he fired. And fifth, he paid attention to the world beyond his office. He understood that global events create corporate vulnerabilities, that a military operation thousands of miles away could generate the regulatory scrutiny that would crack open an armor of institutional protection that had held for a decade. If this story resonated, if it made you think about your own situation differently, then you should be here for the next one. This channel documents real stories of strategic, calculated, devastating workplace accountability. Every week. No noise, no gimmicks, just the playbook. Hit subscribe right now. Tap the bell. And if you have a story of your own, if you are living your own version of this right now, leave it in the comments, because your story might be the next one we tell. Somewhere right now, flights are rerouted because of a conflict most people cannot find on a map. Gas prices are climbing because of decisions made in rooms that none of us will ever enter. Markets are shifting, supply chains are fracturing, and corporate boardrooms are recalculating every assumption they held last quarter. And somewhere right now, in an office building very much like the one Derek Cole sat in, someone is enduring a boss who humiliates them, a system that ignores them, a workplace that extracts their labor and discards their dignity. If that person is you, I need you to understand something. The same global disruption that is grinding the machinery of international commerce, that same disruption is creating cracks in the armor of every toxic leader in every institution that has chosen to protect power over people. The cracks are there. The question is not whether they exist. The question is whether you are building your file.